Welcome to our deep dive into the comfort crisis by Michael Easter. You actually sent this one in, so I'm guessing you're pretty interested in this whole idea that our search for comfort might be having some downsides.
Yeah, it's a pretty intriguing idea, right? Like all the things we do to make life easier could actually be making us less tough and maybe even less happy in the long run.
Exactly. And Easter kicks things off by taking us straight to the Alaskan backcountry. He spends a whole month on a caribou hunt with Donnie Vincent, who's this super experienced bow hunter. But get this, it's not just about the hunt. It's what he calls a misagi.
Misogi. I bet some people haven't heard that word before.
Yeah, I hadn't either.
It's this ancient Japanese tradition of basically going out of your way to find hardship, like pushing past your comfort zone to build resilience.
And trust me, this Alaska misagi is intense. We're talking freezing temperatures, rough terrain, and even running into grizzly bears. It's pretty wild compared to our lives with, air conditioning and everything being so convenient.
Definitely. And that contrast is kind of the whole point of Easter's argument. He's saying that we've gotten so used to comfort that we've lost touch with our natural need for challenges and a bit of discomfort.
Which brings us to comfort creep, this sneaky thing where our idea of what's comfortable keeps getting higher. Think about it. Remember when cars didn't all have heated seats? Now it's like you can barely imagine winter without them. That's comfort creep in action.
And the problem, as Easter points out, is that this always wanting more comfort, it doesn't actually mean more happiness. It might even do the opposite.
Really? I thought more comfort would equal more happiness. That doesn't seem to make
It
sense.
does seem counterintuitive, right? Well, research shows that our brains are wired to compare things, not just take them as they are. So we're always comparing ourselves to something better instead of appreciating what we have. So even as our lives get objectively better, we end up less satisfied because we're stuck on what's missing.
So it's like we're on a treadmill, always chasing the next level of comfort, but never really feeling content.
Exactly. And this is where Easter's idea of rewilding comes in. He says we need to actively bring some beneficial stress and discomfort back into our lives to fight back against comfort creep.
So we've got Misagi, which seems pretty extreme, and rewilding, which is still kind of vague.
Yeah.
What does rewilding look like in real life? Does everyone need to go on a month-long wilderness trip to feel the
Oh,
benefits?
no, definitely not. Rewilding isn't about copying exactly what our ancestors did. It's more about using those principles of challenge and discomfort in our modern lives. It's like resetting our expectations and waking up that toughness we all have inside.
So what are some real-life examples of rewilding that people can actually do?
Well, Easter looks at a bunch of different things, from changing how we move our bodies to how we use technology and even what we eat. One big area he focuses on is movement. He says modern life has made us way too sedentary, which means we're losing our natural ability to move well.
Right, we all know exercise is important, but what's different about Easter's approach to movement?
He calls it rewilding our movement, meaning we should be doing things that use our bodies in ways similar to how our ancestors did.
So instead of just hitting the treadmill at the gym, we should be thinking about more natural movements like walking, carrying stuff, lifting things, even squatting.
You got it. Easter talks a lot about the benefits of rucking, which is basically walking with a weighted backpack. It's surprisingly good for strength and endurance, plus it works your balance and coordination.
Sounds like a great way to get exercise and enjoy the outdoors. But what about people who aren't into intense physical stuff? Are there other rewilding things they could try?
Definitely. Easter also digs into our relationship with boredom and silence. He says all the digital media and info overload we get these days has robbed us of the quiet time our brains actually need to work, right?
Wait, boredom? You're saying I should be trying to be bored? I don't know about that.
Haha. I know it sounds weird, but research actually shows that our brains need time in what's called unfocused mode to process info, come up with new ideas, and just recharge. It's what happens when we daydream, let our minds wander, or just be in the moment without any specific task.
But there's always so much stimulation around us. It's like we've forgotten how to just be.
That's exactly it. Our phones, computers, TVs, they're constantly grabbing for our attention. We're so used to this flow of information that we get anxious when things are quiet and still.
So how do we get back to being okay with boredom? Seems tough in our hyper-connected world.
Start small. Try just 15 minutes a day without any devices, just sitting in silence. It might be uncomfortable at first, but stick with it. You might be surprised how good it feels to give your mind a break from all the noise.
This is all really interesting, but I gotta admit, the whole idea of going out of my way to feel uncomfortable, physically or mentally, seems a bit much. What's the point? What do you actually get out of it?
That's a good question. Easter's argument is that by reintroducing these challenges, we tap into our natural ability to be tough and adaptable. We become less bothered by stress, better at handling tough situations, and ultimately more content with our lives.
So it's not about being a masochist or liking pain. It's about resetting how we think about discomfort and realizing it can actually help us grow.
Exactly. It's about understanding that our comfort zones, while they seem safe and cozy, can also hold us back. When we push past those boundaries, we open ourselves up to new things, new ways of thinking, and ultimately a richer and more fulfilling life. It's like building up a tolerance for discomfort so that when the tough stuff comes along, we're better at handling it. And Easter also looks into the world of nutrition in his book. It's pretty fascinating how he challenges some of the usual thinking about dieting and really emphasizes a whole foods approach.
Yeah, I'm always up for hearing different perspectives on diet. It seems like there's a new fad diet every other week. What's unique about Easter's approach to this?
Well, he doesn't try to push any specific diet plan. Instead, he wants us to take a step back and think about our evolutionary history. For most of human existence, we didn't have access to all those processed, calorie-dense foods that are everywhere today. Our bodies just aren't built for that kind of diet.
That makes sense. So if the modern Western diet isn't really what we're designed for, what should we be eating then?
Easter really stresses the importance of food volume and satiety. He talks to Dr. Mike Cachet, a nutrition expert, who debunks this idea that all calories are the same.
Wait, calories aren't all equal? I always thought a calorie was just a calorie no matter what the food was.
That's a really common misconception. Cachet explains that our bodies actually react differently to different types of calories. Foods that are lower in density but higher in nutrients, they tend to keep us feeling fuller for longer, even if they have fewer calories overall.
So it's not just about counting calories, but choosing foods that are actually going to nourish our bodies and keep us satisfied.
That's it. Think about it this way. Try feeling full on a shot glass of olive oil versus a big bowl of salad with lots of veggies and lean protein. That salad's going to be way more satisfying and keep you full for longer, even if it has fewer calories than the olive oil.
Wow, that's a great way to think about it. It makes a lot of sense. So by focusing on those foods that give us more volume and keep us feeling full, we're working with our biology to reach a healthier weight and have fewer cravings.
Exactly. It's just like rewilding other parts of our lives.
Hmm.
And speaking of challenging assumptions, Easter takes a pretty interesting turn in his book. He connects our obsession with comfort to our cultural fear of death.
Wow, that's a connection I wouldn't have made. How does he explain that?
Well, he goes to Bhutan, sometimes called the happiest country on earth, to meet with Buddhist monks who have a totally different view on death than we do in the West. In their culture, death is seen as a natural part of life, something to accept, not be afraid of.
That's so different from how we usually think about death in the West, always trying to avoid it or delay it.
Exactly. And the monks say that this acceptance is actually key to real happiness. By accepting that we're not going to live forever, we can let go of constantly chasing material things and needing approval from others.
So it's like death reminds us to focus on what truly matters instead of getting caught up in always wanting more comfort.
That's the idea. And Easter thinks this might be one reason why we're so obsessed with comfort. We're trying to create a barrier between ourselves and the fact that we're all going to die someday. But in doing that, we might be missing out on the real richness and fullness of life.
So maybe instead of trying to avoid all discomfort, we should embrace it as just a normal part of life.
That's a big part of what Easter argues for. He suggests that by facing our fear of death, we can actually be more free to live a meaningful life. It's a big shift in perspective that can change how we think about everything.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Easter looks at a bunch of different rewilding strategies. What are some other things he talks about?
Well, along with movement, diet, and facing our fear of death, he also gets into the importance of reconnecting with nature. He talks about all the research showing how good spending time in nature is for our physical and mental health.
Yeah, that's something I think we all feel instinctively. We just feel better after being outside. But it's interesting to hear that there's actual science backing that up.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole field of research looking into the effects of nature on us. And the results are really impressive. Studies have shown that being in nature can lower our blood pressure, reduce stress hormones, boost our mood, and even help our immune system.
It's like nature has this power to calm us down and heal our bodies.
That's a great way to put it. And it's not just physical benefits. Nature can also help us be more creative, focus better, and even feel a sense of awe and wonder.
It's like we connect to something bigger than ourselves when we're out in nature.
Exactly. And Easter argues that this need for nature is something we've evolved with. For most of human history, we lived close to nature. So it makes sense that we feel peaceful and like we belong when we're surrounded by trees, mountains, or the ocean.
But in our modern lives, with all the cities and technology, we've kind of separated ourselves from nature. We spend our days looking at screens, breathing artificial air, and hardly ever going outside our buildings.
And Easter points out that this disconnection might be part of why we're seeing more anxiety, depression, and even attention problems these days. It's like we're missing something vital for our well-being.
So what's the answer? How do we get back in touch with nature and experience all those good things it offers?
Easter says we need to make nature a part of our everyday lives, even if it's just small things. It could be as simple as taking a walk in the park, doing some gardening, or even looking at pictures of nature.
Those are great ideas for bringing nature into our routines. But what about when we want something more immersive, a deeper connection?
For that, he says we should look for chances to really immerse ourselves in nature, like going on a weekend camping trip or even on a longer wilderness adventure. It's about understanding that nature isn't just a luxury, it's something we need.
It's about rewilding our lives, getting back into balance with the natural world. And one thing I like about Easter's approach is that he doesn't just tell us to go spend time in nature. He actually gives us practical tips for making that connection stronger.
Yeah, that's helpful. What are some of those tips?
Well, he says to use all of our senses when we're in nature.
So not just looking at the pretty view, but really listening to the sounds, smelling everything, feeling the textures.
Exactly. It's about being fully present in the experience. He also suggests moving our bodies while we're out there, whether it's hiking, running, or even doing yoga in a park.
That's a great way to engage both our minds and bodies at the same time. And I remember he talked about soft fascination, right?
Yes, soft fascination. That was such a cool idea.
It really was. Can you remind everyone what that means?
Sure, it's a kind of effortless attention where our minds are engaged but not super focused on any one thing.
Sounds like a form of mindfulness.
Exactly, and Easter says nature is the perfect place to practice soft fascination.
Because it gives us just enough to keep our attention without being overwhelming.
Right, and being in that state of soft fascination lets our minds wander, make new connections, and listen to our intuition.
It's like giving our brains a break from the constant demands of modern life.
And in that relaxed state, we might discover new insights, find solutions, or just feel more peaceful and clear-headed.
It reminds us that sometimes the best way to figure something out is to step away from it and let our minds wander a bit. As we've been talking about all these different aspects of rewilding, it really hits me that it's a journey, not a destination.
Definitely. It's an ongoing process of trying things out, learning about ourselves, and adapting. It's about always pushing our comfort zones, both physically and mentally.
And being open to the unexpected, the messy parts of life, the things we can't predict.
Because that's where the real growth happens. Now, we've talked a lot about rewilding ourselves, but Easter also says community plays a big role in this.
That makes sense. We're social beings after all. Connection and support are important.
He says we need people around us who support our efforts to live a more wild, happy, and healthy life.
People who encourage us to push our boundaries and celebrate our wins.
Exactly. He also suggests finding mentors or guides who can teach us things and share their experience.
It's like tapping into the wisdom of those who have been there before.
And community isn't just about support, it's also about accountability.
Right. It's about having people who'll call us out when we're slipping back into old habits.
People who will remind us of our goals and help us stay on track.
It's like having a safety net, a support system to catch us when we fall. And while that support system is important, Easter also talks about how rewilding is bigger than just ourselves.
Ooh. What do you mean?
He says rewilding isn't just about personal transformation, it's also about building a better, more sustainable relationship with the whole planet.
So the environmental aspect of rewilding, it's about recognizing that we're all connected to nature.
He suggests that by rewilding ourselves, we can actually help rewild the Earth.
So making choices that help protect nature, support biodiversity, and keep the planet healthy.
Exactly. And understanding that our own well-being is completely tied to the well-being of the natural world.
It's like coming full circle, realizing we're not separate from nature, but part of it.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into the comfort crisis, I want to point out that this book is more than just tips and tricks.
Definitely. It's a call to action, a challenge to rethink our ideas about comfort and really embrace the power of discomfort.
And it reminds us that true happiness and feeling fulfilled doesn't come from avoiding challenges, but from facing them head on.
It's about becoming our most authentic, wild, happy, and healthy selves.
It's like we're being invited to step out of this comfortable bubble we've built around ourselves and rediscover the energy and excitement that comes from embracing the natural ups and downs of life. Right, and it's important to remember this doesn't have to be some huge, sudden change.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you, challenges that feel meaningful, and something you can actually stick with.
It's more like a series of little experiments.
Exactly. Like trying a cold shower, having a 15-minute boredom break during the day, or swapping that bag of chips for an apple.
And pay attention to how those little changes make you feel.
Do you have more energy? Are you more focused? Do you feel tougher?
That's the feedback that'll guide you on your rewilding journey.
I bet some people are listening and thinking, this all sounds good, but I'm just too busy. I don't have time for all this rewilding stuff.
Oh, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way. And Easter actually talks about that in the book.
I'm curious, what's his take on the whole too busy thing?
He says that a lot of times our feeling of being busy is something we create ourselves.
We pack our schedules so full and then wonder why we're overwhelmed.
Exactly. He says we need to take a hard look at what's really important and make space for those things.
Things like our health, our relationships, and our connection to nature.
Yeah, he encourages us to ask ourselves, what are the absolute must-haves in my life? What are the things that make me happy and feel truly alive? And then build a schedule that reflects those things.
So it's not about adding more to our to-do list. It's about being more mindful of how we spend our time and energy.
Exactly. It's about saying no to the things that drain us and yes to the things that nourish us.
And sometimes that means saying yes to discomfort.
Because, as we've been talking about, discomfort can be a sign that we're growing, pushing ourselves, and becoming better versions of ourselves.
It's a reminder that we're not supposed to just stay the same. We're supposed to be constantly changing and adapting.
And this whole idea of rewilding, of rediscovering our most authentic, wild, happy, and healthy selves, it's a journey that's worth taking.
It's a journey that can lead us to a more fulfilling, meaningful life.
So we really encourage you to embrace the challenge, step out of your comfort zone, and tap into the incredible potential you have inside.
And remember, it doesn't have to be all or nothing.
Start small, try things out, and see what works for you.
Because, like they say, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
And that first step, as Michael Easter reminds us in The Comfort Crisis, might just be the most uncomfortable and the most rewarding one you'll ever take.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into the comfort crisis, and I want to thank you, our listeners, for joining us.
If you're looking for more insights and practical tips on how to rewild your life, we highly recommend checking out Michael Easter's book. It's a thought-provoking read that could change the way you view comfort and challenge.
And until next time, remember to embrace the discomfort and keep exploring the wild within.